The old marketing cliche, so to speak, you could, word of mouth, you can gain 100 customers, 10 customers word of mouth, but if you give a bad review, how many customers can you lose? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Yeah.
And I guess to follow up on this a little bit, if not exactly bait and switch, if salespeople are paid commission for their sales, wouldn't it make sense that some of them are likely to upsell? Might make sense that they would want to do that. What happens if someone comes into the store with what is that offer that was made in the newspaper, on radio or television or whatever, and that salesperson says, that's good, but you know, this is better? It might actually be the case. Is that misleading? Is that fraudulent? Is that deceptive? Is it legit?
It's not going to fall under those categories. A consumer is expected to have some educated knowledge about what they're doing. And if they want to buy a product and it's available and the salesman doesn't tell them they can't buy it, is just trying to sell them something better, in his opinion, and again, it's only his opinion, that's legit. If he tells you you can't buy the other product, it's not available, and it is available, or he uses some other deception to get you to buy something else, that's a whole different situation.
That goes back to the unfair deceptive trade practices.
Right.
Or just discouraging? You don't really want that because you know that product wasn't as good, it's inferior.
He's a salesman.
Nice. Well,
that's what happens.
He could be losing his job, too.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting,
No.
I find, is what is the value of those extended warranties and those types of things? I'm sure there's probably a commission on them selling the extra warranty that the store gives you above and beyond the manufacturer. Is that illegal? No. They can't force you to buy it. Maybe there's a value to it. You'd have to study that as a good consumer. I'd want to go online and find out as much as I could about any of those types of things before I bought them, because you know if you buy an electronic product at most stores, they're always going to try to sell you that extended warranty.
Are there any retail industries or any particular industries that you know of that are currently being watched more than others? Typically, I know in Rhode Island, it was for years that the automobile dealers were very carefully watched, and their ads were scrutinized by the Journal at the time. That was really the only paper in town, so to speak. But now they apparently have some self-governance.
But one thing that comes to mind is home improvement. Rhode Island has a task force now for home improvement contractors, because so many people have been defrauded by home improvement contractors, and that's one area that I think they're really watching. It used to be furniture stores in the past. I don't know how prevalent that is now, but the first thing that comes to mind is home improvement. Maybe a topic for another show.
And on that contractor's situation, there's a agency where you can file a complaint in the Department of Business Regulation, Contractors Licensing Board, and you really don't even need an attorney to prosecute that complaint. There's a hearing officer, you present your evidence of what happened, and they're very strong about enforcing whether or not the contractor treated you correctly or not.
I guess tied to that, although it could be another segment certainly, a mechanic's lien. If I am a homeowner and I ask a contractor to fix whatever, I'm assuming that everything that he buys and I'm paying for, that he's able to buy and pay for. Come to find out that if in fact he has not been very honorable with his suppliers, I could be on the hook for that cost of those supplies, even though I've already paid him for it. I'm still not getting the goods from that store because he has a lien. I understand there's some waiver. How does a consumer protect himself or herself from that?
First of all, the mechanic lien law in Rhode Island is very rule-oriented, so you just can't run down the registry of deeds and say, plop, here's a mechanic's lien. It's very specific. It's governed by specific rules.
Yeah, there's a process.
Yeah, there's a process.
Followed.
You just can't go ahead and slap a lien.
Right. And beyond that, the bigger problem would be where there's a general contractor on a bigger project and there are subcontractors.
Yes.
Those are the folks that are more likely. A supplier can, put a lien on property. That doesn't happen as much as when there's a subcontractor who's done work. You've paid the general contractor for it and they haven't been paid. Then they'll more likely know how to follow the process and put a lien on your property.
Another thing for consumers to be aware of. Well, if someone does buy something at a reasonable cost or at discount and it's a bad thing, Tell us about the lemon laws. We know about them with cars. Tell us a little bit about the lemon laws and how that's supposed to be working these days.
Well, there's two types of lemon laws in Rhode Island for automobiles, a new car law and the used car law. And they're different, and they have a little bit of a different process. I believe the new car law, if you bring it in, is it 4 times, Jackie, within a year or something?
Within 1 year of buying it, or under 15,000 miles, it has to be brought in 4 times for the same
Same problem, yeah.
defect. Then you have the ability to invoke the lemon law, and they have to take the vehicle back.
Right, and what happens with that, it's those situations where there's knocking in the engine or something, and you keep bringing it back for the same problem. And the two things you really should be aware of is, first, make sure you document every time you bring it in, and also the second thing is how long has it been in there each time. And then when you get to that point where it's been in 2, 3, 4 times, generally what I've seen happen is if it's a new car, they'll bring in a representative from the factory and they'll start trying to work with you. And generally I've seen some pretty responsive work from the factory and the dealer. But if it gets to that point where it's not getting fixed, that's what the lemon law is for.
Is it different between Rhode Island and Massachusetts?
Massachusetts, you have a lemon law, but you also have a statute called the Consumer Protection Statute, which is subchapter 93A of the Mass General Laws. Our Consumer Protection Statute is by far probably one of the most, I would guess, the stringent consumer protection statutes in Massachusetts, because not only do you have the lemon law, but you also have an argument of unfair and deceptive trade practices. It's very, the law is very expansive. It covers a lot of areas, and I think you can loop a consumer protection argument in with a lemon law. So it's similar, yeah. It's the same. It's similar.
And we spoke earlier about the Rhode Island unfair practices, but it doesn't have the teeth that 93A in Massachusetts does. That's a very strong statute.
93A is broad. It's very broad. As a matter of fact, there's a section of unfair deceptive trade practices for insurance companies, for instance. You can file something akin to a 93A, which is called a 176D complaint, if they refuse to negotiate in good faith with you. I know many years, or even now with the General Assembly, they're always trying to push a similar 93A statute in Rhode Island, but they haven't been able to make that, to enact any legislation.
It's my understanding of 93A is you can get treble damages. So 3 times your damages if they don't react to the letter and try to resolve the problem. And it's for consumer issues.
Consumer, yeah, it doesn't apply business to business. So for instance, if you spend $20,000 and you are alleging in a 93A complaint that it was shoddy workmanship and it costs you X to repair and your damages are now 50, if they don't respond within good faith or make an effort to rectify the situation, come back and fix whatever, then you can in fact get 3 times damages.
Right. And in Rhode Island, as Jackie was talking about, we do have, for insurance situations, another statute, which is if it's your insurance company and they won't negotiate with you in good faith, there's a bad faith statute you can sue under, which is a separate claim than just the claim that you're trying to get resolved. For instance, if you had property damage to your car and they won't pay you fair market value for the car, you could sue for bad faith.
Is that similar to what's called shaken faith? In other words, even if something has been repaired, the way they handled it, the way they handled me, they had it fixed, not quite fixed, I went back 3 or 4 times, my perception, maybe not reality, but my perception of that car or that large appliance is clearly not what it was when I bought it. Do I have recourse then? Just because I don't really want this now. You've treated me this way, you've not fixed it, it's been fixed, I've had a run around, I've been paying more than I should. When that happens, does the consumer have recourse just because I don't really think I want this anymore, you should take it back?
Well, you go back right back to the place where you purchased it. Any good retail outlet, if I'm assuming you're talking about an appliance, any good retail outlet should negotiate in good faith and give you a similar return substitute.
Yeah, and it's another interesting thing. As you were explaining the question, the automobile situation struck me. There's no statute in Rhode Island about shaken faith in the sense that, they have to compensate you because you're not happy with how they dealt with you or what the product is, the car that you have. The interesting question there is, typically what the insurance company has to do in an automobile claim is put you back in the position you were before the accident.